Hi, welcome to another 3 True Scary Stories from Reddit. Before we begin, I'd like to say that the links to the 3 stories will be in the description below if you choose to want to read along with me. Also, if you like this video, make sure to subscribe for future content. Anyway though, let's begin. Number 1. I made a new account for this, because even now, 20 years later, I don't want people around me to know. Before I tell my story, let me set the scene. It was the summer of 1996, and I was 15 years old. I grew up in a good neighborhood, in a typical Swedish university town with my dad. I was a pretty well-behaved kid, did good in school, didn't smoke or drink. In fact, I didn't want to go to parties. I didn't have a boyfriend, but I had a crush on a boy at school, and I felt pretty sure he was curious about me too. But we were both shy people. This took place in the end of August, when the light summer nights start to slowly grow darker, and the days shorter. It was a very hot summer though, and all the popular girls would wear white tight tops to show off a flat tummy. And one day, I bought one for myself, just to try and see what it was like to be a normal teenage girl. I had those silly shoes too, the Spice Girls inspired ones, that sprained many ankles during that era. Afterwards, I wondered if the outfit is what started it all. Suddenly, I started to get notes. They were placed in the basket of my bicycle. Notes with messages such as, "Like your style, baby," and "growing into a woman right before my eyes." I didn't tell anyone. I strongly suspected the idiot gang at school. 2 of them lived close to me, and I thought they were teasing me for changing my style. Teenage logic. We've all been there, right? To show them that I didn't care, I wore my new style all the damn time. One morning, I noticed that someone had stepped on the flowers in the flower beds under several of our windows, and I told my dad about it. He worried it was someone checking the place out, planning to break in, and asked me to turn on the alarm whenever I was alone. Things have gone missing before, insignificant things, but still, you never know. My dad owned a rather successful small business, and to celebrate the 10-year mark, he wanted to treat his employees to a weekend away, and had booked a place up in North Carolina. I was used to being left alone at home. Sometimes his work demanded that he travel for a week or so, and it wasn't a problem. Again, I was a good kid. And anyway, only a few houses down the street lived a couple that we knew, and they usually checked in on me if I was alone for many days. They had no kids of their own, and often helped out with everyone else's. It was on the Saturday that it happened. I arrived home very late, on my bicycle, after having watched Cutthroat Island at a friend's place. I walked in the front door, and noticed a draft. Had I forgotten to close the window before I left? Then I noticed that the alarm was turned off. Had I forgotten that too? I walked through the house to the living room, when suddenly Mr. W., the man from down the street, stood in front of me. "Hi there, kiddo. Did I scare you? I just came to check in on you." I found this strange since it was well past 1 at night, and he smelled of alcohol. "I'm fine. I'm off to bed now," I said as I got the strangest feeling. Despite it being a hot summer night, I was shaking with cold. Something inside of me told me that this was an extremely dangerous situation. Something about him was off, as if he was wearing a mask, as if someone else was behind his eyes, not the friendly Mr. W. that I had known my entire life. "Wine?" he said, and nodded in the direction of a wine bottle. I shook my head no. "I don't drink. My dad, you know," I said, and tried to sound normal, but my voice didn't feel like my own. "Oh, you're almost a grown woman now. You can do as you wish. he continued, pouring wine into an unwashed glass. "I've been watching you. You really have grown." He kept telling me how beautiful I had become, and how he had noticed my new clothes, and that I surely knew that it was an open invitation to men. "I'm a nice person, don't you think?" he said. "I will be good to you. You can trust me. I will be real gentle." I started to back towards the front door, but he stops me by grabbing hold of my upper arm and pulling me towards him. "Don't be like that. No one likes a tease," he says. And when I try to break free, he laughs and goes, "Wanna play, huh? I can play," and starts to shake me. I feel how much stronger he is. Then I realize I have to make him let go long enough for me to run. At this point, it is as if someone else hijacked my brain, and I started saying and doing things that I wasn't even aware of until afterwards. "Yeah, I like to play," I hear myself say, and he smiles and starts to touch my hair. He dragged me off to the bedroom, and I tried to pretend to be into it. I had never had sex, or truly wanted to have sex, and I had no idea how to fake it, but I tried. The moment he tossed me down on the bed, I said, "You must go lock the front door and turn on the alarm," as I tried to look eager and not scared out of my mind. "Okay," he said, "don't move." I was on my feet faster than I thought possible and locked the bedroom door from the inside. My plan, however, had not turned out as I had hoped. He had taken me to my dad's bedroom, not my bedroom. My bedroom had a window that led out onto the roof of the garage, and from there I could have jumped. But this room had no such escape, but it had a phone. My brain had forgotten the number to the police, and the only number I remembered was my dad's work phone. He answered almost right away. My dad phoned the cops from his other phone, and I still had him on the line while Mr. W tried to open the lock with a screwdriver, shouting at me and promising me to gut me like a fish when he got in. My dad also phoned another neighbor, Mr. K, who used to be in the military and often bragged about how he would treat any burglar to a troop to the emergency room, if given the chance. Mr. K arrived before the police, and he didn't break his promise. But the sound of the fighting outside the room was terrible, and I had no idea who was on the winning side. Mr. K was an old guy but fit. But what if Mr. W had a weapon? I don't think I dared to breathe until Mr. K asked me if I was okay. And I didn't dare get out of that room before the police arrived, and even then I was almost unable to move, as if my mind had escaped my body. A man who I had known since toddlerhood had suddenly started to stalk me and planned to use the fact that my dad was out of town to rape me and God knows what else. I trusted him, and I had been so wrong. I still have trust issues today. I spoke to his wife once, long after the incidents. She had filed for divorce and told me that the reason she refused to have children with him was that deep down she feared that they would not have been safe in their home. Mr. W is dead now, and I'm glad. We will never meet again. Number 2. Please excuse any mistakes, as this is my first post. Usual story. Long-time lurker that figured I'd share one of my creepy encounters. For a bit of backstory, I was around 10 years old at this time, and it was the heat of the summer about 10 years ago or so. My great-grandmother lived about an hour away from my parents and I, so I only saw her about once a year for holidays. That being said, this particular summer my cousin, 13 or 14 at the time, was living with great-grandma for a few weeks. Now, great-grandma lived in a very rural, tiny town, downtown, if you can call it that. It was made up of 2 streets and a mercantile general store. So it would seem that everyone knew each other in this close-knit community. However, aside from its few elderly residents, the cheap cost of living attracted all manner of drug users and shady characters. So, one day during the summer, I had nothing to do, and my dad decided it might be fun for me to spend the afternoon with my cousin. Great. As an only child, I was thrilled to tag along with my cooler, edgier older cousin. We'll call her Sarah. Dad dropped me off early in the day, and we spent several hours watching movies and playing music. The standard for two tween girls. Soon enough, Great-Grandma decides she needs some supplies from the store. At this point, Grandma has quite a time hobbling around. So she asks if Sarah and I will run a block over to the general store for milk and some other random things. I, a natural warrior, already felt uneasy at this. At 10, my mom rarely allowed me to take jaunts on my own, especially not in unfamiliar territory. Plus, I had heard plenty of stories of the drug busts, fights, and crimes around Grandma's neck of the woods to have a reason for being anxious. But I put on a brave face and reassured myself it was broad daylight and only a stone's throw away from Grandma's. Heading down the street, I start to feel pretty good. Here I am, accompanied by my hip older cousin, laughing and skipping rocks as we slowly meander to the store. I suppose it was at this point I let my guard down for a moment, as I failed to notice anyone suspicious around between the houses and our destination. When we arrived at the store, we spent some time dilly-dallying, pursuing movies and sweets, but I began to feel a sickening feeling in the pit of my stomach not soon after. The way the store was laid out, the aisles were divided by shoulder-height shelves, so at any point you can see any other shopping patrons. I glanced around, and my alarm bell started ringing as I saw an older man, tall, in his mid to late 20s, staring from across the store. Beside him was a short, round man with a gray beard that looked much older, maybe in his 50s. I tried to brush it off, but could not shake the feeling of being watched. Sarah didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary, so I gave her a nudge and whispered that the men were staring. She shrugged it off, and we continued to scan the aisles, checking off Grandma's list as we went. Suddenly, I noticed the men approaching, walking right towards us. I quickly became engrossed in the nutrition facts of whatever box I was holding, leaving my older cousin to handle the confrontation. "Hi there," the younger man said, smiling. He was one aisle away from Sarah, and she smiled back, much more outgoing than shy me was. "Hey," she replied. I couldn't help but notice the older, balder man leering behind the speaker, almost ogling around his companion to look at us. I desperately wanted to bolt, but Sarah seemed intent on finishing the task at hand. "How old are you girls?" the young man asked. This automatically freaked me out. I had enough lectures from my mom and enough lessons in school about stranger danger to know better than to give my personal information out. 13, Sarah blurted, oblivious to the potential trap. The men looked disheveled, unshaven, and filthy, as if they hadn't showered for days. I hoped that someone would save us, but we were the only customers in the store. "Well, you sure are pretty," he continued, edging closer to Sarah. Finally, she seemed to understand that something about the situation seemed off. The men had no groceries, no baskets, and just gave off some serious bad vibes. As I was several aisles behind Sarah, I did not manage to hear the rest of their brief conversation, but whatever was said was enough to warrant a stern glance from her and a quick 180 to the checkout. She grabbed my arm and yanked me, power walking with our half-done shopping. The cashier seemed to take ages to realize we were waiting for assistance as the men followed us to the counter. "They're probably just buying lotto tickets," Sarah whispered. though I could tell she was spooked. We scrambled to pay, the cashier completely oblivious to the weirdo child predators looming behind us with their odd grins. Sarah and I kept it cool until we hit the doors, at which point we sprinted across the street and down the block, bags in hand, not looking back until we hit the corner. I saw the men, empty-handed, looking a bit disappointed that they hadn't lured us in. I realized we probably should have gone elsewhere so as not to alert them to our whereabouts, but neither of us lived here, so we just booked it back to Grandma's. At this point, I felt queasy and terrible for the rest of the day. But we agreed telling Great-Grandma was pointless as she was rather cold and also unable to do much in terms of protection. We casually locked the doors and closed the blinds. It wasn't until the car ride home that I told my mom about the incident. "She let you walk to the store alone?" she said frantically. It was then that my mom chose to tell me that she had heard from one of Great-Grandma's friends that a young man that lived next door to the store had been discovered as a registered pedophile, and she specifically requested I was not to go outside without an adult present to supervise. Needless to say, I did not visit Grandma alone again. And to the presumed predators at the convenience store, let's not meet again. Number 3. Firstly, I'm sorry if my English is bad. It's not my native language. Anyway, one night, I stayed on my campus until late at night. It was about 1 a.m. in the morning that I decided to go home. On the front gate of my campus, there was no public transport left, so I had to take the one which is rather far, and I needed to walk for 10 minutes before I get there. The path which I had to take had no streetlights, so it was dark. In the middle of my way, I met a woman who I knew about. She lived near my boarding house. I once saw her at some cafe near my boarding house, and I saw her come out from the house in front of my boarding house the other morning. It seemed that we were going the same way, and I didn't really think much about it at first. Then, she looked over her shoulder and started walking faster than before. The next thing I know, I was left alone there. After I finally arrived at the main big street, there was a bus parked at the side of the street waiting for passengers. That's how it works here in Indonesia. As soon as I got onto the bus, I noticed that the same woman as before was there on the bus too. She looked terrified when she saw me, and then she changed her seat far from mine. I then realized that she thought of me as a stalker. It was funny for me until I realized that I will get off the bus together with her, and then she might really think that I was stalking her for real. I was confused. What should I do? Should I talk to her and say, "Hey, I might be big and scary, but I'm just a normal college boy who lives in the boarding house near your house"? But that would be awkward, so I decided not to. Finally, I get off the bus, and yes, she got off there too, of course. My boarding house is located in a private housing complex. To get there, I have to walk in a small alley first. That night, the alley was very dark, and that woman was running in a hurry towards the alley because she thought that I was after her. I walked slowly, thinking that if she didn't see me right behind her, she might feel safe and let go of all this. I was very wrong, because just when I was about to go into the housing complex, there she was, looking terrified, and started screaming at me. I really didn't know what to do, so I just approached her and told her to calm down. I was going to explain all the things when she took out a kitchen knife from her bag. The situation intensified. I jumped back and told her I'm not a stalker. She didn't believe me and approached me with a knife. I was going to run when a boy who lives in the same boarding house as me passed us and knew something wasn't right, so he approached us. He told the woman, she was confused as fuck, that I live in the boarding house. I then apologized to her, but she was still upset and left us there, still looking at us with her judging eyes when she walked out of there. I made sure she was already far from me when I finally thanked the guy who saved me and told him all of it. He laughed at me, but I couldn't. I had just had a knife swung at me and it scared me. So yeah, the woman who lives near me, I'm not a stalker, and I have no intention to stalk you whatsoever. So please don't think about me as a bad guy who followed you home the other night. I am sorry that you were scared of me. Let's not meet again like that, and I hope you have no bad feelings about me. Thanks for tuning in to another 3 True Scary Stories from Reddit. Remember, if you like this video, subscribe for more content. Have a great night, everybody, and as always, stay safe.